Okay, my topic today is retaining the National Quality and Career Standard, focusing on using the career mark approach. I am Janet Hutchinson. You possibly know me. I am now called, for the time being, the Career Mark Manager. That's how you can contact me if you want to personally email me to ask any questions later or just for information. And that is our phone number. Now, hopefully it's going to behave and move on. So what I'm looking to do is to review how CEIAG has been impacted by COVID-19 and consider how to redress this. Appreciate the impact of the new guidance and the new framework, understand key elements of the process, and be aware that Career Mark 8 is on its way and it will affect how you may want to request the revalidation depending on how far away it is and what you've already done. So, COVID and CEIAG, we all know that there was a massive impact on provision in some areas. Work experience was probably particularly hard hit, depending on who or where you are. It may have been that you actually saw more employers, but you might have seen them remotely rather than seeing them in person. Guidance, again, a number of organisations, including ourselves, began to offer remote guidance, and some of that has continued. We're also aware that there have been issues perhaps around numbers of staff in schools, what you could do. And possibly once lockdowns were over, depending on the nature of your school, there may have been pressures on enrichment and PSHE, which may include careers. Some schools have seen that it is really important to keep careers central in this particularly difficult time, but others have taken perhaps a little more 20th century view in my mind, perhaps, and have continued to think the most important thing is to catch up on the academic work. Now, at Career Mark, we obviously realise that's important, but we do think the supporting of successful transitions and helping young people to have a name is really important. You may also, of course, have staff changes. There were negatives to the pandemic, as I say, but there's also been some positives. Maybe improvement in the remote guidance, maybe better communication over emails, certainly using online platforms and things like this have leapt forward since March 2020. I'd never done a Zoom or a Teams meeting or not very often done a webinar. Now I do them regularly. So it's also perhaps helped with others, adults and youngsters, to think, how do I work best? When they were at home, if they had the facilities, did they find that a positive and enjoyable experience, or didn't they? Were they desperate to get back to school to be with lots of people or not? We're certainly pleased that during the pandemic, it does seem that school and college leaders have recognised overall that careers guidance is more important than ever. And this is just to update you about, if you like, what will have happened and therefore what's expected of you as a quality and careers standard holder when you are next revalidated. Careers guidance continues to be the term to use for all 8 benchmarks. The guidance is now for schools and colleges, And it has a dedicated section for governors and senior leaders. Always really important. And if your governors and senior leaders haven't read it, I'd suggest that they do. There is also the Baker Clause, which is strengthening something that was already in existence, the access to other providers of education and training. And it's very clear that schools, colleges, whoever must allow other providers access to their learners. And that may be Key Stage 4 learners, it may be Key Stage 3 learners, it may be post-16 learners. In this new statutory guidance, destination data also features prominently, as does the role of Ofsted. We'll have a little look. And the good thing, in a way, that's the right way to put it, certainly something that means we as quality award licensed body and assessors means is a little bit easier for us. There is no longer a time scale by which you must all be expected to meet the 8 Gatsby benchmarks. They still want you to use them, they still want you to work towards them, but they have removed a time scale. Again, looking at what's happening, the musts and the shoulds. Okay, you must do something means it's a legal obligation for the school. And should means, well, they'd like you to, but if you could make a good case for not doing, you might sort of get away with it if you like. Okay, find that in the guidance. Other things, and these are quite important for us when we will come and help you retain or assess you to retain your quality standard. You must publish your careers programme and careers leaders details on your website. I personally also suggest you try and make them pretty obvious, and that, remember, careers is part of the curriculum. It isn't just an add-on. So sometimes when I go on websites, I do struggle to find where it says careers. Sometimes it's very prominent, others it's a bit difficult. So bear that in mind. You are also expected to make sure that all independent careers guidance is provided to all 12 to 18-year-olds. Okay, that will, we believe, by next year go down to 11-year-olds. And of course, remember that is the whole deal on the package. You also have to decide on what you're doing around DBS. You have to make sure learners, and ideally, of course, their parents or carers, are clear on RPA. If you're a college, you must hold matrix, and generally speaking, you must report data around destinations to your local authority. You must also allow access to the full range of post-16 and post-18 providers. Whether you're expected to do it post-14 is obviously not as clear, but it might be good practice depending what there is locally. You must publish your access policy statement, and you mustn't stop learners from going to open days, visits, etc. And again, and I know that this can be a little bit tricky in schools, there should not be, as your learners go through, a bias towards any particular route. And in some ways, this contradicts other government initiatives, but I'm only telling you what it says in our document. And there should be impartiality, and academic and technical routes should be equal. So if you begin to talk to begin to talk to year 7, for example, about university as a possible option, or indeed a possible employment opportunity, You should also be talking to them about apprenticeships, because there are now so many of those. When you're talking about different learning qualifications, you should be talking about T-levels as well as traditional academic routes, and they should understand them. Now, that may also require a bit of training for your staff, your parents, your governors, but it is important that that happens. There is also some strengthening of what we used to call career guidance, the one-to-one work of the career professional who is a guidance professional. It now tends to be called personal guidance, and the Gatsby benchmarks have made it clear that everybody by the time they're 16 should have an interview with a level 6 or 7 career professional. What they didn't say previously is how long that should be. And we are aware that, and I think the CDI became aware, that career professionals were being asked to do 10, 15, 20-minute slots with young people. That does not allow them to do personal guidance. So they have now put into the statutory duty that it should be recommended at 45 minutes plus. And obviously still the recommendation that people are registered CDI professionals. So you've got lots of things floating about. You might have new resources as well. We're still thinking about STEM. We're still needing to know about LMI. We've got Skills Builder that is now available, the CEC supporting it. You may have more enterprise coordinators. You may be more involved in a career hub. So what should you be doing? And my comment here is reviewing what you're doing already. You've got the standard once, so you have a good program in place. But has it stayed there? Has it suffered due to the pandemic? What can you do to make sure it still meets what is required? Do you have time for the careers learning? There is a new framework. You should be looking at that, reviewing it, looking at needs analysis, and looking at how hopefully not only you maybe are tracking their learning, but that learners themselves own it and track it. And the people who may be teaching or delivering the Careers Ed programme, what's their expertise? Have they got training? And what does your website say? So that's all things you need to be looking at. There, I'm sure you've all come across them already. What I used to describe as the 3 strands in a way has now become 6. Some of them are very similar. And I think what we've done is begin to look at a broader picture and also be aware of the need to balance life and work, and also to grab opportunities where we can. But it is still about very much understanding yourself, self-awareness and growth. And unfortunately, that isn't always focused on enough, in my opinion. So remember that all your staff need probably to be introduced to these 6 areas and what has gone on in careers. We haven't needed to change our structure, we don't believe, so you will still be measured against 4 components where you will be asked to tell us how you are delivering them, if you like. What are you doing? Your descriptions, your description grid. So how are you managing your programme? What advice and guidance is in it? What information? And what's the career learning and possibly why? There has been a very slight change in this. When we were fully aligned with the Gatsby benchmarks, there became 3 possible outcomes. One is which you meet all the Gatsby benchmarks and all the quality and careers criteria, which are on top of that, and that is fully meeting everything. Second is that you were making good progress, and that was usually towards the Gatsby benchmarks because they were difficult to achieve. And therefore, that meant that that was what it said on the documentation. You could be deferred, but the way the career mark approach works, that's very, very unlikely because we don't carry out a final assessment if we ever think that is likely to happen. There needs to be sufficient evidence in place to reassure us that unless somebody's been doing a very much smoke and mirrors job, there will be evidence of the good practice that you've shown us. So those are what was there, and they're still there. And 1 and 2 are both positive outcomes, but there's a slightly different way of acknowledging them now, in that in some of the documentation and paperwork, the making progress may not feature quite so highly. When you're doing the time for your new assessment, first of all, make sure your membership's in date so you can access the website. That's the current cost for 2 years. You need probably to complete the revalidation report. However, if you haven't started at all, maybe hold on to that thought, and I will tell you a little bit more about Career Mark 8 shortly. You then need to use the website, the members area, to request an assessment, ideally giving us 8 weeks notice. You have an assessor allocated and a provisional assessment agreed. The portfolio is assessed, and only if they are happy with that will they agree to come and do a visit to check. So successful completion of that, if you like, leads to the next bit. Apart from, of course, this is what will be happening in the second stage, which you've all been through if you're maintaining your award. So that's what are your learners learning. You may want to consider the new or relatively new Ofsted type language of intent, implementation and impact. However, it's still about knowledge, competence and attitudes towards themselves and work and progression. So it depends how you want to do that. It is important you've been doing some monitoring, reviewing and evaluating. And again, we're looking for continuous improvement. But let's be totally realistic. Following a pandemic, I am not expecting all schools to have improved in leaps and bounds. It must be like swimming against the current. So I'm hoping you won't have gone backwards too far, but if you manage to stay where you are and are looking at new ways of working, perhaps, as I remember at one point things used to be called when you did them differently, that's what we're trying to look at for you, with you, and then say, and now how are you going to move forward? So that's all important. What we will still ask is, have you addressed or looked at the recommendations whoever assessed you the first time wrote on your report? Now, we know that even without a pandemic, things change and they may no longer be the priorities, or you can't do them because other things have changed. But what we need to know is, well, yes, we got this recommendation, we've thought about it, and this is what we've done. Or we did thought about it and, well, we didn't do that, but this is what we did instead. So again, what has changed, if you like? You need to address your recommendations. And the other thing, and again, these days, most of you, though not everybody, tend to submit evidence in electronic format. Electronic formats are in a way much easier to update than old bits of paper. So how current is what you put in, or what's the evidence that you used last time, and has it been appropriately updated? Have policies been reviewed? If not, I appreciate the statutory duty only came out in July and it's not always possible to do everything immediately. But if it hasn't yet been renewed or reviewed, your policy, what's the timeline for it happening and when? Same with the new learning framework. That came out a little earlier, but again, life was tough last academic year. It may well continue to be fairly tough this academic year. But what are you doing? What are your plans? Have you got some staff training already done or in the pipeline? Are the governors helping to pull through all the careers stuff that needs to go on? And what we would like as well, still doesn't have to achieve all 8 benchmarks, but is a relatively recent COMPAS assessment. We're saying at the moment 3 months. So depending on when you're thinking of being revalidated, that's one of the things you will need to submit. Now my presentation, there we go. Now, as I say, if you have started and wish to continue to write the CareerMark revalidation report for CareerMark 7, which is what you all hold, then you can continue to do that. There was an annual review, possibly. There again, it might have slipped under the net because of COVID, but there is a revalidation report that you can complete. However, if you haven't done that and you are maybe a first reval or even a second reval, it depends, but certainly the first time you're coming back, what we suggest is, because this is what everybody is going to have to do before too long, is that you revisit the complete description grids so that you probably don't need to start again. You've written stuff down, and some of it may be the same, but again, that's the advantage of IT. Is it still that your cohort is like that? Is it still that so-and-so is still delivering the programme and in charge? So you may need to change bits, but you might not need to change everything. Obviously, because the old description grids didn't address the recommendations, they are slightly new description grids. Basically, I have an M10 at the moment. If you know them as well as I do, we go up to M9, which is monitoring, review and evaluation. We've added an M10 for CareerMark 8, which says 10A, what have you done after 1 year? And 10B, okay, what did you do after 2 years? So we haven't officially launched CareerMark yet, but we are intending to before long. We won't immediately stop using CareerMark 7, and we haven't yet been able to work out all the absolute starts and finishes. We're working on it. Like you, we're dealing with a lot of things. So it is a sort of suck it and see from your point of view. I appreciate if you've held the award for a very long time, rewriting description grids might seem a bit of a daunting task, but they're probably a lot simpler now from CareerMark 7 than they were for 6, 5, 6A or whatever. So have a look at them. They're on just look at the Career Mark 7 ones, because we're not changing them much, we're just adding a bit. So, as I say, same thing again, Career Mark 7. Basically, I'm also almost repeating myself, apart from, again, if you've done an assessment in the last couple of years, what we asked was you maybe used our SharePoint to put your evidence on, and we would then look at it. What we are now saying is, please put it on your IT platform somewhere. Because of GDPR, we don't really want to be holding it all. And what we would then ask is, once you have it ready, can you allow an assessor to come into that platform and review the evidence there? It should be fairly anonymous, the sort of things we're looking for. We don't want personalised stuff as evidence, ever. So that's a slight difference about who's owning the platform. But other than that, that is the bit you may have started to fill if you're doing Career Mark 7 revalidation form. But to say, if you haven't started, it may be worth thinking about doing the other thing. And again, same sort of thing. You need current membership. You can this time complete and submit the description grids, school introduction, and supporting evidence. Okay, so that's what we're looking for as a possibility. If anybody's confused at the end, email me, ask, ring us up and ask, and we'll answer questions. The main thing is to remember, in a way, are your policies up to date? What are you doing to make sure the new statutory duties are going to be met? How are you addressing what you may have missed in the pandemic? How are you moving things forward? One of the other things that we have decided on the back of the pandemic, we will continue to do remote assessments as a norm at the moment. I know there are a number of schools and indeed assessors who feel it would be preferable to go out to the school and do the assessment. However, we are very aware that that takes time. There are travel costs and the environmental impact of travel often. And we found that, to be perfectly honest, remote assessments generally work quite well. Often they're done while the learners are on the school site, but the assessor isn't. But during the pandemic and lockdown, we have also done them with neither learners nor assessor on site, and it's quite possible to do that. A revalidation is a half a day. As I say, we generally will do it remotely. If you really want an assessor on site, then we will find somebody and make arrangements so that it can go ahead, but you need a backup plan in case things change, and it will cost a little extra because of the time and the travel. But the assessor judgment then is usually made on the day they are verified and finalised, and then you need to pay your revalidation cost to get the whole stuff. So again, reminding you what the outcomes can be. That's a sort of visual representation. I'm not a very visual person, I'm a words person. I was an English teacher, but some of my colleagues like a visual representation, and I understand that. So if you start at the top left, move yourself down, that is in theory the way that revalidation happens. Okay? And again, that's is we like to think you get your plaque, your certificate, your report. It's still 2 years, ongoing improvement. Revalidation should offer you good value. And again, if you can revisit that original submission, that should make it a simpler, easier process for you. And in theory, we will want fewer than the original 50 pieces of evidence. And we really are trying to encourage people to keep the pieces of evidence down. We know you like to show us good practice, but it takes you time and us time. And what we are keen on is the key documents. So think about those, and we may well even for Career Mark 8, we're hoping to release a list of what we think are essential documents. But again, organisations are very individual, and what is essential for one organisation may not be essential for another. So again, we don't want to be too prescriptive. Again, if you get 2 consecutive revalidations, you then become eligible for the Career Mark Gold plaque. Doesn't say you're any better, it says you have shown a long-term commitment. And again, if you keep going to 6 consecutive assessments, and we do have a number of people who manage that, and all power to their elbow, you can have a platinum assessment award. I think that is virtually the end of what I have to say today. Okay, I have a particular question from Samantha. I would say, Samantha, email me and I will, she wants to know whether she should start, it's February, she's booking for her first revalidation. I would say, email me, Samantha, and I will send you my grid, which has on the bottom of it 10A and 10B, and then you can work on what was your last submission if you like. Okay, so that's what I would say. That's probably your simplest route, because you will, I hope, still have those documents. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, see how many of you are still out there. If anybody wants to speak to me, look at me, see me, I am available. No problem. If people need to go, feel free. I've said what I need to say. The session will be recorded. I hope it's been useful. This will be, somebody said, would I mind sharing my PowerPoint? We're going to record this, so the PowerPoint will be available with this, but if you want the PowerPoint, email me and I will send it you. I don't think I've got a huge problem with that. Anybody else got any questions? You're all very busy people, so thank you for attending, and say best of luck with sorting your revalidation out. Thank you, Liz. I'm going to finish the recording now. If anybody still wants to talk to me, they can.